Hi, Peter Charles here of Hook for Life Fly Fishing. And today we're going to look at tying feathers on a hook. I've got a 4/0 hook here, typical hook that we might add to a spoon or a plug. And I want to tie some feathers to it. I want to add some attraction. So we're going to look at doing this. I'm going to start right from the very beginning, assuming that you've never ever tried to do this before. We're going to look at some of the tools. We're going to look at how we can put it all together, and we'll end up with a finished product. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to have to do is have something that's going to hold your hook in place. Now, you can buy yourself a vise, and this one's not an expensive one. I bought this one about 25 years ago. It didn't cost me very much money. So you can pick something like this up if you want. However, you know, mother's necessity of invention, 2 C-clamps. And I've got a vise. So, you know, you can do something with vice grips, for example. So, anything that will hold your hook in place will do the job to get started. Okay, let's start off by looking at the tools we're going to use. Now you can get these from a fly fishing shop, or some tackle shops will have them. We need a bobbin. This is what we're going to use to hold our thread and wind it on. We're going to use a threader, and this will help us put the thread on the bobbin. We need a decent pair of scissors. Don't get big ones. Something with a nice point is a good idea. And we're going to need hackle pliers. And the hackle pliers are used to help us wind on the hackle, which I'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. Okay, let's look at the materials we're going to use. Okay, my thread is a 3/0 red thread. You'll see the size here, 3/0. 3/0 is a heavy thread, and you want a heavy thread for this job. Some of the finer threads like 6/0 and 8/0 are designed for fly fishing, tying small flies. You don't want to use that kind of thread for this. The other thing we're going to put on is our hackle, and this is called saddle hackle, and this one is what we call grizzly. It has this barring. It's very attractive, and it's going to be look great in the water when it comes through the current. Now, you can also get saddle hackles like this, and this is very expensive stuff. You don't want to be buying this stuff unless you plan to do an awful lot of fly tying, because it is expensive. This strung hackle is a lot cheaper, and I recommend you start off with that. Again, this stuff can be purchased from a fly fishing shop. Okay, here's our bobbin, and let's put our spool of thread on, and we snap it into the clips. Now we're going to take our threader, put it through, and if you've ever seen your mother or your grandmother do this, and they're sewing with their sewing machines, and there we have our bobbin ready to go. Let's start off with the fly fishing convention here, which is to wind on the thread away from us. I recommend you learn to do it this way. Not that it makes a huge difference, but if you start watching other videos, everybody does it this way, so you might as well be consistent. We'll start off the front of the hook, and we're going to wind back and lay on a base of thread. We're going to go right back to the point of the hook. There we go. The purpose for this bed of thread is to keep the material from spinning around on the hook, and it allows the material to grip onto the hook. Now, when we open that bag of saddle hackle, we'll see there's some bigger feathers and shorter feathers. We're going to take half a dozen of these shorter feathers, and we're just going to pick them right off. Try and pick some that are reasonably straight. Now you see I have a bunch of feathers here. What I'll do is I'll line up the ends. Some of them have fluff on them. I don't worry about the fluff too much when I'm doing this kind of job, because it's all going to disappear when I wind it on. So now I'm going to place that on the hook in this fashion. And now I'm just going to do what we call a pinch loop. See how I've gripped it and put it on top? I brought it up, I've gripped the thread, and I bring down and I pull down. Now what that does is it keeps the material on top of the hook. If I was just to spin the thread like this, it would spin the material around. So now I'm going to advance this forward, and now I'm going to trim that off. Be careful not to cut your thread when you're doing that. If you've got any stray bits, get rid of them. Now you see all this ragged stuff here? I'm going to clean that up just by winding over it. And this is just part of being neat and making it look good. Okay, the next step is to wind on a hackle, and I'm going to take one of the larger feathers, and you see we have some fluff at the end here. I'm going to get rid of that fluff as I just strip it off like this. Just pull away, and it comes right off. Now, there's a couple of ways we can do this. We can tie this on at the tip, and we can tie this on at the butt. I'm going to tie this on at the butt because I want it to be fat at the back end and skinnier at the front end. So I'm just going to wind this on like this. I'm going to bring my thread forward. And you see that bit that's hanging off there? I'm just going to cut that off. As you can see, my old vise is not gripping this hook very well. This is where we use our hackle pliers. I'm going to come in, I'm just going to grab the tip of the hackle like this. And this allows us to keep a grip as we turn this. Now, watch what we do here. I start to turn this. And as I turn this, I just pull these feathers back. I just pull them back. And when winding, each time I'm doing this, I'm winding in front of the previous turn. So I'm going forward as I do this. Always pulling the feathers back with each turn. Okay, now I'm going to bring my thread back. My poor old vise here is not doing so well. It shows you what happens when you use a big hook on a 25-year-old vise. And there, my hackle pliers fell off, which is just as fine. I don't need them anymore. And I'm going to pinch these feathers. I'm just going to wrap back. And I'm not going to wrap very tightly. I'm going to wrap that rather easily. There we go. Now we've got a few strays in there. Just going to make that look neat. Now I'll just clean this up. And this is part of the neatness part. We can clean this all up here. Now at this stage of the game, I could add more hackle in here. I could change the color. I mean, you can be quite creative with that. You can add some more color in here. We could have tied this so it's more at the front of the hook than the back of the hook. I left room here so you can see what I was doing, but you could very easily have started your hackle up here and wind it up to the eye if you wanted to do that. Lots of choices in how to do this. But that's the basic technique right there of how to tie some feathers on a hook and add to the appeal of your lures. Now our last step is how to tie off the thread. This is called a half hitch. And you notice how I'm making a cross here with my fingers? I'm crossing the line over, making a loop. I'll do a number of these. And then I trim off my thread. Our final step is to take some head cement, which is specifically made for fly fishing, and I'm going to use a small brush or a toothpick, and I'm going to coat that thread to allow it to stick and have some durability so that when the fish hit it, all that thread doesn't come apart and all your feathers fall off the hook. So this is the last step to coat this with head cement. I'm going to use a small paintbrush, a cheap paintbrush that I got from the dollar store, and I'm going to coat this thread all the way around, all sides, with the head cement. Be generous. And if you want to really make it look nice, you can put a second coat on. And that keeps the threads from falling apart after a fish hits it. So that's a simple way to add some feathers to a hook to improve the appeal of your spoons or your plugs. So it's easy to do. Give it a try and get out there and catch some fish with them. Cheers.